Main event, Pete. Good
Main
news,
event.
eh? Oh, good news. NWA champion Ric Flair versus Sting in a pinfall or submission match. Dudes with attitude surrounding the ring, and Ole Anderson to be handcuffed to El Gigante. There'd been a lot of bait and switch matches leading up to this where it ended in disqualifications or countouts,
right?
With Lex Luger taking on Ric Flair, and people had begun getting very angry about that. And so they made it clear. I love the fact when you do a big main event like this, you have to make clear that we're not going to fuck you over. They really didn't. Ole Anderson as well, at this point, he is the booker and he is beginning to make sure he's in the main event thing.
Yeah.
The big thing there is, you know, you've got the dudes with attitude surrounding the ring, but the important thing is Ole Anderson handcuffed to El Gigante, the biggest star in the business, you know, quite literally and figuratively. And not literally, he wasn't the biggest star, he was the tallest. Ole Anderson is small compared to some of the other wrestlers, so it is a good visual image. But again, it's that funny thing of once you're given the book, it's very hard not to put yourself into the prime action.
Yeah, but I mean, literally, presumably, if you're in the main event, cha-ching, cha-ching, that gives you a bit more money.
You get a bit of cash, yeah. At this time, 1990, 2 months before WWE have had WrestleMania 6, that has featured the match where the Ultimate Warrior has had the torch passed to him by Hulk Hogan.
Cool.
So Warrior has gone over Hogan, the torch has been passed.
Yeah.
Neither of those things were actually. Hogan was very clever. He made it clear he was not passing the torch, but he was simply allowing the Warrior to hold the torch for a brief while, and he knew full well that he would be back if the business continued to perform badly, which it was. He also, of course, when he passed the torch, made a big deal of himself by applauding the Ultimate Warrior and not fucking leaving the ring. So now Ric Flair is essentially doing the same thing with Sting, but I think Ric Flair is not going into this thinking, I can manoeuvre my way through this. Flair is going, yep, I've been on top for a long time, we have to make way for new blood, and let's give the new guy one of the best matches we can possibly give. Now, Flair and Sting have worked together a number of times over the years, most famously at Clash of the Champions 1, where they went to a 45-minute draw. Sting, at that point, relatively unknown. He'd been in the UWF and Mid-South, and this match basically made Sting. In one single sort of hour of time, Sting was made. He suddenly elevated way up the card, and he became a future superstar. You could see it written all over him. And Flair and Sting got on really well. Again, in the Stone Cold thing, Flair has nothing but good things to say about Sting.
Yeah. What did you think when you first met Sting? Because you're the guy that really put him on the map.
You know, Sting is one of those guys that, what can you say? Just the nicest kid in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and all he wanted to do was learn. And he had the greatest look. I mean, that look back then with the paint and the
long trunks
and the crew cut and all
a lot
the
of neon green
and all that stuff. Yeah, and I mean, he had a phenomenal physique. He looked like $1 million, and like Steamboat, I said, let me have this guy.
Yeah,
he's the only guy that can't crack the drink. He just won't even have a drop.
There is a sense that Sting wasn't passionate particularly about the business, that he was good but not great. He was okay on the mic, he was okay in the ring, but he had a gimmick that got over and that people really got behind. And nobody has a bad word to say about him. So this is basically like old-fashioned wrestling was. You would have almost like a 2-year build. From the moment someone comes into the territory, they were going, and in 2 years' time, we hope he's going to be here. And you can see that with Sting absolutely perfectly. And it pretty much goes to plan. Until they get to February of this year at the Clash of the Champions, where Sting fucks his knee up.
Right.
He's climbing up a cage in an angle that he didn't really need to do, and he ruptures his patella. And so all this has been delayed. And they've already pulled the trigger on it because he's beaten Ric Flair previously in a tournament as both good guys. And so we're building, and this has just been put back on the back burner. So what slightly happens with this is this storyline wasn't as hot as it had been.
Right.
It's built for 2 years. There's been a roadblock, and then we're back on it, and it just slightly feels like it peaked. They ideally would have loved to have got ahead of WrestleMania 6. I think they would have done it in probably, it would have been March, and they would have beaten the WWF to crown the new star ushering in the 90s. And instead what happens here is it looks like they're copying. It's just a real pain. You have the face of the 80s losing to the guy who's in face paint, who appeals to the younger demographic, and the match is pretty much the same length. It's a much better match, but the problem is the WWE have just done it in front of 60,000 people live.
And you're doing it in front of 10,000 people.
3 months later.
Right.
You know, it's WCW all over.
And I think also, like, the setup for me is even the passing of the torch, but all of Sting's friends are outside, so it's not really a face's story, is it, really? That would be the heel.
No.
The heel would have all of his naughty friends outside, wouldn't he?
There's a big thing about, like, handicap matches. You never have two good guys against one bad guy.
Yeah.
Because if the bad guy loses, well, of course, he was bullied. Yeah. If he wins, fucking hell, you two were shit. So it is that thing of when you load the deck too much in the favour of the good guy, then it's making it unfair to Flair, to use a Bobby Heenan thing that ran for a long time with WWF. Not fair to Flair. It's unfair to Flair. And that's what you have here. You have a guy who has got all the odds against him. Everything's gone Sting's way. Sting has dictated the course of the match. And so, well, of course Flair's going to lose.
Yeah.
There are little things like that in retrospect you go, oh, that could have been handled better. What will happen with this? And the match is really good. And at the time, it was a big match. People were slightly disappointed with the way it ended, which I think is a sort of roll-up, isn't it? A small package.
Yeah, you wouldn't call it a spot, would you?
No. And what happens is you don't get an epic thing. You're like, oh, so like Iron Sheik earlier. That's essentially what's happened. He has backslid him and Iron Sheik has been pinned and you go, oh, shame it didn't get another 5 minutes. You know, who knows who would have won? And so what you don't get is definitive sort of, they celebrate it really, really big. And I think, again, with this problem, a lot of the old school fan base, they don't like this guy with his bleached hair and his face paint. He looks like the Ultimate Warrior.
Yeah.
And everyone hates the Ultimate Warrior. And because, Ultimate Warrior is not a wrestler. And this is where wrestling happens. And I think there's a lot of the old fans are becoming a bit nervous. I just think that people sort of looked at this and thought, is this the end of wrestling? Sting is fine, but he's not the worst. But you go, this is how it's going. It's going cartoony. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of, I don't know, he's got dyed hair. And I bet a lot of people who went, how am I going to root for this guy? He would go on to become not a great draw for WCW. I don't think anyone was particularly drawing that well at the time. But they gave Ric Flair the belt back in January 1991. The attendances had been dwindling.
Was he like a merch? Sour on him again. Was he like a merch guy? Was that
he
why?
Was. To be honest, I mean, after this point, 1990, he is the merchandise player in WCW. Yeah. He sells merchandise from now until 2001. Right. He is always in the main events. He is always a big star. He is never jobbed out. He's never cheapened. And he evolves his gimmick really brilliantly as time goes on.
This is an historic night. One more dance with the Nature Boy, Ric Flair. We started it years ago, Rick. And tonight, we're going to end it once and for all. And for all you fans out there who are wondering what the future holds for Sting, well, the only thing for sure about Sting is nothing's for sure. It's showtime, folks!
Sting actually did an interview, a real interview, about this match many years later, and he said, I'll never forget the noise, the reaction that came from those wrestling fans. It was amazing. It was a goal finally attained. Aww. One of the best reactions I ever heard. It was what I'd worked for. I do like it when you hear stuff like that. You sort of go, it is very easy to go, yes, I mean, he's not the best performer. You go, yes, he wasn't very good on the mic. When you hear them go, that was my job and I did it well, you sort of have to go, yeah, you really did. It'd be amazing. Imagine being given a tape of you doing your job from 1990.
Yeah.
What was that? Your job at that time would have been what, like maths?
1990, something like that. Yeah, just not doing anything.
Here we are, Pete. We're going to look back and criticise you doing maths in 1990.
Jet Set Willie, Big Day of the Tentacle.
Look at the way he's sitting on his bed. He's sitting there cross-legged. He's not even slouching.
He's listening to like Love Links with Grim Torrington on TFM, wanting a girlfriend at 11 o'clock. That's pathetic.
He doesn't even have a girlfriend. He's underrated, and part of the reason he's underrated, I think, largely, he didn't have that WWE run. But if you'd have taken his WCW run by itself, he would have been a contender for the WWE Hall of Fame. He has this TNA run where, again, he just conducts himself in a way that is really remarkable. He seems like such a decent man, a man slightly, to some degree, unaffected by the rigours of the wrestling business. But the reason for that is he actually became, in 1998, a born-again Christian. Right. He seemed to be having problems during his career with drugs, alcohol, and women. And women seemed to be the big thing. Right. And so he confessed everything to his wife when he became a born-again Christian. They did stay together. They aren't together now. So, he does
a lot of thing that you think you can get over.
Yeah, well, exactly.
I fucked 3,000 women. But if I've fucked one of them, I've fucked 1,000,000 of them, because look at the state of me.
But let me just say, I take Jesus Christ to be my saviour. Washed me clean. Washed me clean.
Came in just at the point that text messaging came into the situation.
The drugs he was addicted to were painkillers and muscle relaxers, which again is very much a common thing. I'd lied to my now ex-wife for years about what I was doing on the road as far as adultery and women, so I had lots of skeletons in the closet, found myself with no ability to fix it all.
One muscle that wasn't relaxed. Tell you what.
Didn't need a muscle stiffener. Instead of a 12-step program, he said I had a 1-step program. It was named Jesus Christ.
And I faced off in the squared circle with the Jesus Christ character.
He said it was a radical, drastic change that happened overnight. Everything changed, even the language that came out of my mouth, he said. This was based, these quotes, on a speech he gave at a Christian-owned water park at their Modesty Matters event in 2013.
Christian-owned water park.
He then began to espouse on the theme that parents have thrown in the towel. They're allowing their sons and daughters way too much freedom in this area.
Isn't it weird that, like, born-again Christians have always had very full, fun lives?
Yes.
And then they go...
Isn't it?
No, I've become a sex addict and now I'm word of the Lord is my word. It's going, yeah, but you had a lot of very devilish fun.
Look,
quite a long time,
I've done it all, so let me tell you, right?
It's unfulfilling.
It's unfulfilling. Look, I've done it all, so I know what you're into, and I know what I was into. And you know what I did? It's almost like I said a magic combination of words, and it was all fucking sorted again. And no one could get cross at me.
No one could get angry at me. Fewer visits to the STD clinic.
True, man. So that is Sting. Now, we're going to be seeing Sting a lot as we go through this in various incarnations. If we do TNA, he'll pop.
He's named after how he felt when he weed. He had sex with so many women.
Working it out.
Oof.